On that note, that actually perfectly leads into a question that I have. So this one comes from me. I want to talk about possible design architectures for AVSs that have slashing as like are more permissible slashing. Whereas like I think we talk about many AVS networks, and the general context that we talk about them is like we want zero slashing events, for which there will be many services where like that is the optimum, zero slashing events. But maybe there's a landscape to talk about AVS networks in which people being slashed is actually a part of the way that the system works and it functions healthily. Like for example, I could imagine, if we all remember the old Augur design, the old prediction market, where people would stake their Augur tokens on the particular outcome of an event, and if you staked in the minority, you were slashed for being wrong, and it was an oracle service, and so somebody needed to be slashed in order for the system to work at all. And as a result of this system, we would had this oracle prediction market, and this thing would function. So I could imagine an EigenLayer AVS network like that, where the AVS role is an oracle. And I could imagine there are other AVS constructions in which a normal, functioning, healthy operating AVS actually has frequent AVS slashing events. And why are we okay with that? Well, because the yield compensates for that and more. Have we thought about sort of these constructions? Sreeram, you want to go first?
Yeah, I this is a really interesting question, and I should say this is out of scope for our current eigenlayer design. And the reason is, you know, systems like Augur have a tyranny of majority. You slash the minority based on a majority opinion. What if the majority was actually adversarial,
Mm-hmm.
and then like tried to impose their like wrong opinion on the minority and get the minority slashed? What really protects Augur? And Augur as a system itself doesn't have it. And the reason it doesn't have this problem is they had a way to fork the Augur token if something bad
Right.
happened.
Yeah.
And this is the boundary that Vitalik has drawn for us, that hey, don't do stuff assuming Ethereum will fork for you. And I think it's a really good design principle of like drawing a boundary. So it's one thing to consider AVSs where you could get slashed, a small amount in the normal mode. It's another thing to consider an AVS which has a tyranny of majority. And I think we just simply don't go there. The AVSs should not have a way to slash a minority of people based on the majority opinion, because if the majority colludes and tries to take down the minority, then it's kind of like a big systemic instability. Okay. And the other really important property, I think so whether AVSs or operators get slashed in a normal mode is still okay. But I think the main thing that we want to kind of like have as a property of eigenlayer is that if you're an operator and if you're honest, and let's say you can even add honest and effective, then you will not get slashed. Right? If you're honest, you should not get slashed as the bar, but you could even like lower that a bit and say, oh, if you're honest and effective, which means diligent and doing your stuff, then you should never get slashed. And I think that is the because that's what retains all the properties that we want about, let's say, an LRT. Right? When somebody's holding an LRT, what are they actually holding? They are saying this would be equal to 1 ETH if I trust that the operators are honest. That's a really nice kind of a mental model, that if I trust these operators are right, then this will be equal to one ETH, because all these other things won't happen. But if we start loading uncalculatable risks into this layer, so this is again like a very sharp boundary. We only want to do validation services, and we only want to do validation services where risks are what we call endogenous. If you are an operator, it should be under your control not to get slashed.
Mm.
That's a very important property, because once it's like that, then all these like cascades and problems that people have about like eigenlayer, they don't show up. But if you don't do it like that, then you have all kinds of problems, and the system kind of like blows up in ways that you can't predict.
Okay, so that sounds like a very firm line that you are drawing. That you are saying EigenLayer will not cross that line. It will not cross the line of allowing for effective, honest operators to get
To be
slashed.
slashed, absolutely. I think that is what that is what makes it all the rest of the properties of the system to actually work.
Okay. Okay. And I think you also kind of implied that that same line is the line that Vitalik was labeling in his blog post, "Don't overload Ethereum consensus."
That's correct. In fact, the example he gave was a USD to Brazil oracle, and
Right.
something crazy happens in Brazil, and then you have Brazil North and Brazil South, and now a majority is voting with Brazil North and a minority is voting with Brazil South, but actually they were all honest, and then suddenly, you're slashing all the guys who voted on Brazil South based on the Brazil North guys, and then it's a
Right.
tens of billions of dollars of each slashed for just being honest and doing your job, but just not knowing that this thing can happen.
Hmm.
So that's the overload that overloads Ethereum social consensus, because then what happens is,
Right.
now do we save them, do we not save them, the shelling point's not clear, and it just like confuses everybody. So that's
Hmm.
why we draw the line there, is because objective attributable slashing for malicious operators, that is what EigenLayer is intended for.
Intended for, yes. And also, EigenLayer is also intended for permissionless innovation. And
Yeah.
at some point, won't these two things collide? Like,
Okay.
if
Great.
EigenLayer is fully
Great.
permissionless, can't I
Great
go
point.
build my subjective augur layer AVS?
Yeah. Great question. So the way we mediate this is by the veto committee.
Mm,
So if I'm a staker, right, look at what I'm trusting. I'm trusting that either the AVS is correct, or the AVS contracts are correct, or the veto committee is good.
mhm,
This is what I'm trusting when I'm opting into the system. That's the flow of trust. And so it is up to the slashing veto committee to make sure that it is able to understand and like veto the slashing decisions correctly. So which means it also has an onboarding function, because it needs to know what is it going to slash or not slash when such a decision comes up. So there is an onboarding decision which sits with the veto committee, so there is a bit of permissioning there. But over time, like I said, we're going to have not one enshrined veto committee, but intersubjective veto committees. Each of them, there can be different groups that different stakers trust, and they mediate different different AVSs. And what this does is, in that world, each of those veto committees still needs to onboard those AVSs, because that's how, because they are in a position of mediating this dispute, they need to know what they're mediating. That needs to be like objective and concrete. And to the users of the AVS, you need a kind of like a clear understanding when you will get slashed and when you won't get slashed. And the problem with the majority kind of a so in a permissionless world, it's possible that some veto committee onboards services which have this kind of properties, but those committees will be less trusted, and less stake will be staked through them. That's what will happen. So the thing is, by allowing for most of the genuine use cases of eigenlayer, which don't create these risks, through the normal mode, you prevent the risk, because most of the yield is from genuine useful services which think through these risks very carefully. And somebody is going to build these things which don't think through this carefully, and we want that to be exposed to the staker. And the way it's exposed to the staker is, none of the big slashing veto committees are going to onboard that AVS. Now I have to go and trust some other random veto committee, and like, hey, why are you doing that? So that is how we stratify risk and make sure that people understand what they're opting for.
To continue leveling up your crypto game, then you need to get on the Bankless newsletter. It's the world's most popular crypto email and is completely free. Just click below to sign up.